Hi everyone, it's Paula from Bespoke HR and welcome to our first Bespoke HR Bites, which we're super excited to share with you. Our first one we're doing on managing development, and the reason we think that is just so important right now is really looking at what are we doing to set up our team for success. How are we helping them grow? How are we helping them master their positions? So in our next little bit of time, we're going to talk through a couple of tips and tricks that can help you set your performance development review process up for success. So to start off with, we often get asked this question when we run these days or our 2-day sessions. There's a bit of confusion about what is managing performance and what is developing performance. So managing performance is probably us looking backwards. It's us looking at how is the person performing against the criteria that we've put in place. So performance management might be things around identifying that somebody's not hitting the standard that they need to, and we're working through that process with them to get them up to the required level. Developing performance is helping someone master their position. So it's helping them look at what do they need to do to grow within their current position, as well as what would they be possibly interested in doing next. And so this particular bite, we're going to be talking about developing performance. We're going to be talking about how do we help grow our team and what are some of the things that we can do to set up our review process for the organisation to have it be one that people actually look forward to. So what are some of the problems that we see with performance review programs? I'm sure you've possibly been in them, hopefully you haven't, but generally what happens when we see the ones that aren't working well is they're not defined, they're not structured, they're not really clear on what happens as a result of them. In fact, nothing really does happen. They're generally forgotten about. They're probably timed in a time where everyone is flat out, and so therefore no one's really got time to do it. People get terminated on the back of them, and so nobody wants to be open and honest when it comes to actually talking or thinking through their PDR process. So we say PDR process being performance development review process, and that's mainly going to be the thing that we're focusing on when we're talking about one of the things that you can do to help develop and grow your team. So they are some of the things that we don't want to do, but what are some of the things that we do want to do, and why do we want to do it well? So before we cover the do, what are the benefits of getting the performance development review process right? The benefits are really that people know that they can continue to learn and continue to grow within your organisation. They understand their career path. So where and what can they do to continue their journey within your organisation? Now, some organisations don't have the ability to do this, but it's really important that we start to think about allowing pathways for people to do this and keep moving that way. Because sometimes people think they have to become a manager to get successful, because ultimately that's the only way they can earn more money. And some people are not meant to be managers or don't actually love managing people. So it's a really flawed career development strategy, is telling people that they have to do this. We have to squash that thinking and make our roles more exciting about from moving this way as opposed to only this way. So really thinking about what's possible for that role. What would that person need to do to master their role? And one of the biggest things that I used to think of, and the biggest aha moments for me as a leader, was to think about what would I need to do with each of my team to move them from being dependent to independent. By the way, it's a great concept for your children as well, if you're thinking about it from that perspective. What do I need to do to help set my children up for success? So ultimately they don't need me. Financial strength and making good decisions and looking at experience around basic fundamental life skills or whatever that might be. Exactly the same when it comes to thinking about your team. What are some of those things, those skills that your or experiences or knowledge that your team needs to have to be able to do things without maybe needing you so much through the process. So as you start to think about that, that's the mindset I want you to get into when we're starting to think about how do you develop performance within your business. So, what are some of the things that we love to see in performance development review processes? What are some of those organizations doing where performance development review processes are really, people are excited about? When they get them, they actually think about them. It drives the energy and motivation to want to complete them, because they know that they're going to be perceived well, they're going to be supported, they're going to be embedded, and ultimately it's going to help people grow within the organization. So what are some of the tips that we see there? Really what it comes back to is organizations that do this well do a few things well. The first thing they do is identify why they are doing it. So is it purely for development? Is it to see if people are on track? Is it to talk about where they're sitting in the organization? Is it about career growth? Is it about personal growth as well as professional growth? What do you actually want to encompass in that? That's the first thing to think about. You're going to link it to salary reviews. Are you not? What are you doing around each of those processes that you want to put in place? But most importantly, you want to think about why you're doing it. The second thing is you want to think about what are the skills we've got in our organization to deliver these. So have we got leaders or people who can actually give constructive feedback, that have the knowledge, have the ability to observe and provide useful feedback, that know the position and what the position needs to master the skill? There's nothing worse than, getting some person who really doesn't know the person, reviewing them and trying to see what they may need when they've actually got no intel or some useful feedback that they can give that person to grow. The third thing is really tailoring something for an organization in terms of the templates that they're using. I can't tell you how many times we get asked, can you just forward a template? Can you just do this? And we're like, that's the worst thing you can do, is copy somebody else's, because they could be at a totally other different level to where you're at. What you really want to do is make sure you're tailoring it to your why you're doing them, to the skill level of your management, and to the capacity of your team. So some of those things that we look at when we're designing PDR processes is what's the maturity of the organization? So have people done these before? Are people clear on their roles? Is the organization moving roles like this? Because if that's the case, it's really hard to kind of define some of those things. We want to make that more generic. Or has the organisation got the same positions that they've had in place for the same amount of time? We know really well what's involved in those roles. We know what good looks like. We know what best looks like. We can actually run some quite detailed performance development review templates. So it's thinking about the process that you're going to be using from the template perspective, from the timing perspective. So what we really want to make sure is that we're doing this at a time that is not your peak busy period within an organisation. For example, we have an accounting firm that often does their reviews in June, which is their busiest time frame of the year. Nobody is really paying attention to themselves because all they're really trying to do is get into financial year stuff out. So it doesn't have to be at a certain time. What we want to do is it be at the best time that actually allows us to have useful information, but also the time and the headspace to properly have conversations with people. The other thing is the pre-thinking. We generally say that organisations should be thinking about their PDR process at least 2 months out and sometimes 3 months out if you think about some of the things that you want to be preparing for as part of that conversation. So having that useful time frame before you actually think about how you do this. Now that may vary. Some people might do it a couple of weeks before, but ideally what you really want to be thinking about is the communication to the team, letting them think about what they need to be thinking of in terms of the areas that they want to grow and develop in further. You want to think about the feedback that you want to give as a manager. So there's some of the things that will come into play in terms of thinking about the time. And the last is thinking about what are some of the options for how you may support people's development. So what are the regular issues that might be coming out of your team in terms of growth? Is it mastering time? Is it about self-awareness? Is it looking at Excel skills? Is it looking at learning from another one of your team members? Like, what are some of the things that you can offer as suggestions? Because if you don't do that and you just rock up and you walk out and you don't really make any useful suggestions, people are going to keep doing things the same way they've always done it, which means they're going to get the same result. So what we want to start to think about are what are some of the options that could be available to really provide support and development to your team, which means that you're going to get really robust outcomes that come out of it. So lastly, how are you going to capture all those actions? So if you individually do all these reviews, what are you going to do as the leader of the team to make sure that you're following up on and checking that people are growing in the way that you intended, that people are focusing on the things that you really wanted them to focus on, but also that we're actually looking across the team and we're leveraging development opportunities where we can. So we've got 3 people that we want to work on in relation to self-awareness or time management or better understanding your client base. You know, you're looking for those opportunities when you can capture it in one sheet to be able to go, I think actually we could probably run a session on this, because there's enough people in the team that could really benefit from learning a little bit more about that. So we've covered a couple of tips around how to set your PDRs up for success and what are some of the things that we're seeing great organisations do. We've looked at some of the things that we don't want to do, but what we really want to get down to is what kind of actions can you do to ensure that you set your process up for success. So part of these Bespoke HR Bytes is about giving you a bit of a call to action, something that's pretty quick, pretty easy, hopefully just 1 or 2 key points that come out of it. More importantly, one action that comes out. And one of the things I'd love you to do is to just write down on a piece of paper, think about it, doing a tick up the top and a cross and a line down the middle. And I want you to just jot down any experiences that you've previously had, whether you've run them or whether you've been a participant to them, that is good, like a good experience that you've had with performance development review processes, and write those down. And I want you to think about the same thing from the negative. What wasn't so good about a PDR process that you've been involved in or have run? What did that look like? So just take a few seconds to think about what that is. And then what I want you to do is think about your current process. Have you got one? Is it defined? Is it consistent? Do people know it? Is it doing what you want it to do? Is it actually delivering some of those things that you want to get the benefit out of? Most importantly, here's how we know if you've got success out of your PDR processes. If we walk up to any one of your team and we say, what 1 to 3 things are you working on right now to better help you master your position, would they know what the answer is to that? So that's what we want to think about. And sometimes those things can get lost because we get kind of stuck in performance management and we're not actually looking at performance development. So I want you to think about what some of those things are, and I want you to think about one thing you could do to your current process to make it a better process. Now, some of you might not have a process, and that's great because you can just define it from scratch, or you can get us to come and do that for you, which we would love to do. Some of you have got a few things you might need to tweak before you head into this. You know, a lot of you will be doing them around June before you head into your process. So this is definitely your opportunity. Or if you want to cheat and get a bit of help, then please yell out to us. We would love to help you with any of those bits or pieces of the processes that sit in that package that we've got, that can just help you put your best foot forward when it comes to investing in your team. So I hope you got a couple of things out of it. We've looked at managing development and why that's important within an organization. We've looked at hearing about what are good examples and what are some bad examples. We've looked at some of the benefits of nailing your PDR process, and we've got you thinking about your current process and a couple of things that you can do differently. So hopefully you've got a little bit out of this Bespoke HR Byte. I can't wait to talk to you in the next one. I'd love to share any outcomes or aha things or things that you'll do differently as a result of this Byte. Feel free to shoot me a note. You know I'd love to see them. Wishing you well with your performance development review processes, and please yell out if there's anything we can do to make your team even better than it is today.